Hey folks, Steve here with another Fatal Alliances playthrough video. We're looking at turn 1 impulse number 6, I believe now. And this is going to be hopefully a much cleaner video than the last one. I think the last video, what I did and I shouldn't have done is just try to play through the turn and then make the decisions as I go. This time I've decided to spend some time looking at the map and deciding what I'm going to do beforehand, before recording all of this. So I have drawn up sort of a battle plan for each allied faction as we go through the allied impulse here, and I have a pretty good idea of everything that I'm going to do, what all actions are going to be taken, and that way we cut down on some of the time spent on me making decisions. I might correct myself somewhere along the way and say, well, that wasn't a good idea. We'll see. And we're going to need that gained time because we're going to be doing some things today that we haven't done yet or we haven't examined in detail related to naval warfare, naval movement with the entry of Perfidious Albion to the fight and a lot of other fun. So we'll get to that and we'll check out some new stuff. So looking at our impulse track, so it is the Allied Impulse, Impulse 6. It is going to be not too far from now that the potential for the turn to end is coming up, and so what we're likely going to see is these impulses are going to go fairly quickly, and then the turn should end very soon, so we'll probably get another video or two in of a couple more impulses, and then somewhere along the way I'm going to roll the required number to end the turn, and then we'll end up doing all of the end turn cleanup stuff. This will go pretty fast because after a while some of these major powers are just not going to have anything to do because all their units are flipped or used up, and they'll pass, which adds to the die, that provides a bonus to end the turn on the die roll. So I think we're just going to end up getting there pretty quickly. So a couple of corrections just from the last video. I wanted to make sure I addressed these right out of the gate because I did catch them. So I had, from the previous Allied intern, I had left the Ivanov HQ flipped up from an offensive that the Russians did. So I validated, watching my previous video over again, that yeah, I needed to flip this guy and I never did. So I'm going to erase my label here, but just to let you know that yeah, he is meant to be flipped. He is flipped. It didn't impact the last central power impulse, so not a huge deal there. I also screwed up moving the German Baltic fleet into the Baltic. They spend some of their movement allowance also moving out to sea, so they should not have been in the 3 box. In reality, they would have been in the 2 box, so I've now moved them here. I can get rid of that. I was using that to remind myself. So in reality, they're here rather than the 3rd box. That's a little bit worse in terms of patrolling ability, but overall not bad. The thing is, you can see, the range and movement allowance of these units are all different, but I've chosen to keep them all together, and so and that reduces the number of actual naval moves taking place. So they're limited by the Barbarossa, that middle unit there in the pop-up. It's got the lowest amount of patrol ability, and so everyone's sticking with the Barbarossa, though some of these other ships, if I had used more naval moves, could have been in 3 or 4 box. So that's what I just decided to do with those guys, and it should be fine. Okay, so one thing that I should have done at the end of the last Allied impulses, I should have right away deposited these Commonwealth entry markers. Once you hit 18 or greater, you put them back in the pool. I didn't do that, but we'll do that now because as of this turn, the Commonwealth should be able to declare war on the Central Powers, but we'll pull out all the tokens and we'll make sure we need 18. So 4, 3, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2. So 7, 11, 14, 17, and then 4 more is 21. So yeah, for sure, we definitely got it. We have more than enough in reality, more than enough to do that. So these are all just going to go back into the draw pile. and Commonwealth is clear to declare. Now, technically, as the Commonwealth player, if I was just playing this in a game, I could decide not to declare war right away. I need that 18 to be able to declare war, but I do believe I can hold off on it if I wanted to. I might need to double check that in the rules, but I'm pretty certain that if I wanted to, I could. Let me just see if there's a rule saying I have to. Once the Commonwealth draws up to 18 entry, they return all ships to the pool and may declare war on the Central Powers without restriction. So I don't have to. I could hold off, but I think at this point, with France getting beat up as it is, I think at this point it behooves Perfidious Albion to get involved in the war. So, looking at our sequence of play, as usual, we have our Allied impulse, and we are at the declare war step. So we're going to follow the instructions there for that, and this is going to be pretty straightforward, like most situations. So the Commonwealth is going to declare war on the Central Powers. We will go ahead and go to our political points, because we have to spend political points. So the Allied political points now go to 10, 9, 8, because the Commonwealth is on the Allied side. They're just not in the war, but for declaring that war, they still have to pay the overall Allied political points. So that goes down. And boy, the political points for the Central Powers is quite high. So they have spent theirs. They're now down to 8. And we also have to take some chits out of the U.S. entry marker pool. So, the Commonwealth joining the war, it's sort of lessening, okay, the United States thinks, Europe's still figuring its stuff out. If you look at the chart for this, it's going to be number 6 on the U.S. entry action chart. The Commonwealth declares war on Germany or Austria-Hungary or both, and in this case, it's just both. It's minus 12, so that means for every 10, we have to pull an entry jet out. So for the first 10, we pulled out a 2, and now we're going to roll a die to determine if we are going to pull another one out, and because there's 2 remainder for the 12 after the 10, we need to roll a die. If it's 2 or less, we will pull another one out. And it's an 8, so we do not have to. And just to kind of see where we're at, so 5, 6, 9, 3, well, that's not too good. That's not too good. The U.S. really wants more to be going in there, but, what can you do? Okay, so we resolved that. Now the Commonwealth can call out its reserves, now that it is officially at war with another major power, and it's at war with, really the rest of the major powers. And much like any of the other reserves, so a couple of things. These militia units that aren't marked with the reserve flag go into the mill force pool. We are going to get garrison reserve, this guy here, and then some more militia. Like all reserves, they're going to start on the map face down. I'm going to flip them up just to see where they go. So London, he's going to be nestled in there with this division, defending the capital. Delhi, okay, so this is going to be going on the world map in India. Let's see, Delhi. India actually has a fair number of troops, and unfortunately, I didn't really set it up to put transports out there, so they're sort of stuck. I'm going to need to figure out a way to get them transported. I really should have thought of that maybe more in the in setup, but oh well, such as it is. Commonwealth's complicated. And then this is Manchester. And where is Manchester? Right here. So Manchester, defending central England, more or less. We also get this garrison, and we probably want to put this in a place that yeah, I want to put this in an okay place, just to make sure we don't completely deprive the Commonwealth of its defended areas. I don't think the Germans are going to be doing anything crazy in terms of naval movement, but just to be on the safe side, we'll throw something up here in Newcastle to defend that factory and give Scotland a little bit of a defense, no big deal. And then this guy, fairly strong. I think I'm going to put in, let's see, I'll put him in Southampton, I guess, with the idea that this will be another unit that I'll eventually try to be moving into northern France to help support the war effort there. I think that's probably an okay move, because otherwise I think down here in Suez, I think the Commonwealth is going to be okay. It's got a fair number of combat power down here to deal with the Ottomans once they enter the war. So very good. Speaking of which, speaking of the Ottomans, I think this turn we are going to go ahead and do one of the other actions. I guess I'll wait until we officially start the impulses, but we are going to use the OE1 entry action to seize the Aran and the Agincourt from the Ottomans. So we'll look at doing that in a second. So going to the actual action selection, the actions for the powers that are in play right now are going to be the Commonwealth, which is going to take a combined action, which the Commonwealth's going to tend to do that a good bit because it needs to be doing a lot of naval stuff. It also needs to be doing some land action some of the time, so they'll do combined, I think, a good bit. France is actually going to take a naval action because I don't think they really have a whole lot of land things that they can do. A lot of their land units are actually flipped, and so we're going to try to keep the line alive, not try to do any battles that are probably not going to go our way, and instead position our fleet in the Mediterranean. And then the Russians are actually going to take a combined action, and the reason why they're going to do that is that Russia, even in a combined action, actually gets a fair number of land-related moves, so they're not really giving up a whole lot, because a lot of their stuff is flipped already anyway, so they have limited options, and they're going to use that combined action to do a little bit of extra stuff, which we'll get to. So right out of the gate, what we're going to have happen is the Commonwealth is going to seize the Aran and the Agincourt. So let's see. Yeah, these are the units under construction. Yeah. And so we're going to I'm just going to delete those guys. Poof. And instead now, it's going to be sort of hard to track, they were over here, the Aran and the Agincourt will now appear here, and they're going to be completed in July and August, at the completion of July and August. Going into September, October, the Agincourt and the Aran will complete, and now we'll get those guys as well. And for doing this, we shift the Ottoman Empire 2 spaces towards the Central Powers. On the political chart, if you want to look at this in the rules, the current rules, it's page 22. So 1, 2, and now the Central Powers have foreign troop access through the Ottoman Empire. Now, this is a case of like, why would I do that? Well, I guess maybe as the Allied player, I might be thinking, if the Central Powers are going to focus on getting the Ottomans in, and it's maybe a foregone conclusion, maybe not, But if I assume that's going to happen anyway, I might as well take away some battleships from them and keep them for myself, so that they're not as strong even when they do come in. And I think that's just, that's fine. Not a big deal. The Ottomans actually aren't that tough, and maybe I'm thinking the Commonwealth can put enough pressure on the Ottomans to cause them to peace out, and we'll be in good shape. So we'll do that. Next, I think what we'll need to do, and really I wish this was kind of on the sequence of place somewhere, is because at the beginning of the impulse, you're supposed to, if you're going to do an HQ reorg, you would do that now. In fact, there should really be a whole step that basically says, are you doing anything with your headquarters? Because it's at the beginning of, at the beginning of your impulse, you decide, at the start of your action, what HQ units are going to get powered up to provide offensive power or whatever, and then after you do that, you would then spend offensive points to turn your in-supply HQs face up if they were face down at the beginning of this. And it basically means, I can't flip Joffre at the beginning of this action and then use him to do an offensive, but I can flip him up, and I think it would be valuable to do that. And so France is definitely going to do that, so they would need to spend 4 to do that, and that would bring them down to 6. So he's flipped up, and I might want to look at the Russians doing that. So this is really dangerous, having this guy here. And the thing is, when it was the Central Powers' turn, I should have attacked, even if it meant maybe losing this unit. I mean, it would have opened up some holes and stuff, but if I would have managed to remove that HQ unit, inflicted a loss on it, even if it's a 0.5 loss, all of these guys would have had supply problems, because it's really the HQs that are the linchpin for supply, and I should have chanced it. I'm not sure what would have happened, but I should have chanced it. I could flip these guys up. How many offensive points does Russia have? They only have 9. So, if I really plan on doing any other offensives, all of my HQ units are flipped now. So I would kind of need to decide, are there any that I want to flip? That would cost 4. That would cost 4. That would cost 3. And how that gets counted is it's 1 plus the reorg value. So if I have 9, I could do 4. I could do these 2, or I could do these 2. Basically, out of the 3 that I have on the board, I can do 2. And I think right now this HQ is safe because everyone's flipped over here, and there's not an HQ unit to improve that. I don't want this HQ to die, so I am going to flip him up. So that's going to cost 3. That brings that down to 6. And I'm going to put it here because I'm going to move it again. And then I'm going to flip Ivanov here for 4 more. So that's going to take us down to 2, which is kind of unfortunate because this is tough. I mean, it really is tough, because once we have, you know what, I'm going to take that back. I'm just going to leave it at 6. What's tough about this is that, if we flipped all these guys up, then they could not, we wouldn't have any offensive points to actually launch powered up offensives. I want to get running comp flipped just to protect them. I don't want to give any more bonuses to that Hungarian unit to attack. Now it's a much tougher attack. It doesn't get the bonus for having a disrupted unit there. here it actually doesn't help anything, because even if we flipped him up and then, oh, okay, we could do more offensives, well, no, we don't have enough points. I may be better off saving it. So now we've got 6. We can build some more later, and probably by the time, you know, anything's going to happen, we're going to have final reorg anyway. Like, I could flip him up and then have him reorg some units, but at this point, they're all going to flip back up when the turn ends, and that's probably not too far away. I'll save those offensive points, knowing that we'll build some more, and then we'll do some offensives next turn or later down the road. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll flip one, good enough, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so now we're going to start actually performing our actions. And a lot of this turn is going to be spent with the naval stuff. So if we look at the sequence of play, we're now going to do naval air missions. Well, I'm not going to do any naval air missions. We're going to do naval movement. So a couple of things that are now in play because the Commonwealth is at war. We now have Japan sort of activated to impact the game, I guess we'll put it that way. And what form that takes is essentially, and I've talked about this a little bit before in other videos. So once the Commonwealth is at war with Germany, some of these Japanese units stay out until they're activated. So these are just like default setup units that are, for now, we're just going to leave alone. But instead, there are some units here that are Germany-controlled and Commonwealth-controlled. And kind of how this is set up is that when the Germans go on the German impulse, they can use Japanese activity limits as if they did a combined. So these get moved in addition to the Central Power movements. And then there is a stack of naval units that the Commonwealth controls, but when the Commonwealth moves them, they are using the Commonwealth's activity limits. And the way I'm interpreting the rules, which you can find on pages 30 and 31 of the latest rules PDF, if I use this stack of Japanese units to move, that's going to count against the naval moves for the Commonwealth combined action. That's how I interpret that. That's the way it reads to me. It doesn't seem like it's in addition to and then just limited by the number of the Commonwealth. I think it's part of the Commonwealth. And the way the Japanese gameplay is sort of set up is that basically the Commonwealth-controlled units, the Commonwealth's just going to use that to do what it can to cut off supply to German units, or hunt down the German Navy that may try to escape and get back home, just sort of cause some grief. But then these German-controlled naval units and infantry units, ground units, what they're going to do, what Germany's going to try to do with them is take German-controlled objective hexes. So Kwajalein, Truk, probably won't be able to get down to Rabaul, but Rabaul is possible, as well as Tsingtao. And you might be wondering, okay, well, why would the German player do that? Well, so here's the thing. It's sort of like a race in the Pacific, and this is a really interesting aspect of the game. I'm really glad that this game reflects that. In almost no other World War I strategic level game does anyone pay any attention to this stuff, which is a shame, because it's really fascinating. So the Commonwealth player is going to be trying to grab these objective hexes to deprive the Germans of the objective hexes. And if the Commonwealth takes them, that's obviously going to mean the Germans don't have the objective hexes, which they need to win the game. They need to have a certain number at the end of the game to win. So there's an incentive for them to take it. If the Germans, the Germans probably aren't likely to retain control of them themselves, but if they use the German-controlled Japanese units to capture them instead of the Commonwealth, those objectives will count for half value for victory conditions. So if the Japanese take Truk and Kwajalein, which then the Commonwealth isn't going to come in and take it now because the Japanese are in control, instead of 2 victory point objective hexes for the Germans, they'd get 1 for the 2, but 1's better than none. Right? That's sort of the thinking here. So knowing you're likely going to lose some of your objectives out here, as the Japanese-controlled units, you can run out here and take control. Sort of a some of the latest revised rules do make it so that if the Allies manage to diplomatically influence Japan to be +9 or higher on the political chart, then the Japanese become a full active ally. The rest of these units come into the game, and then I believe it is that these objective hexes count for none again. So, yeah, I think that's the case. I'm just trying to make sure in the rules here. Yeah, I think that's the case, and in any case, it's not going to matter now. But that's the whole little situation out here. So we will be looking at moving those Japanese units along with the Commonwealth units. And since we're on the subject, because the Commonwealth is taking a combined action, if we look at the number of naval moves, so the Commonwealth gets 3 naval moves. I'm going to go ahead and use one of those naval moves to move this stack of Japanese Commonwealth units out to the China Sea, and I believe we can get to the 2 box, so we will. And what that's going to do is it's going to cut off supply to Tsingtao. So all of these units here, this whole hex is now out of supply because it's not going to be able to trace back all the way back to Germany proper. And I think that's as far as we would want to go. Alternatively, we could go to the Marianas, or maybe even the Bismarck Sea. Yeah, that actually might be better, because we'd want to put Rabaul out of supply and maybe try to invade with the Anzac division, though that's a pretty weak unit. I'm not sure they'd be able to take it. But I think this will be fine. So we're going to cut off the supply of Tsingtao. All those guys are kind of stuck there. If the Germans try to get them home, they're going to have to potentially fight their way through this Japanese fleet. So I think that's the right move there. That leaves the Commonwealth with 2 more naval moves. The other naval move we're going to take is we're going to move. We are going to do it. We're going to take the huge Scapa Flow fleet up here, the powerful British Navy, and we're going to go ahead and move them. Actually, I'm going to maybe leave this unit behind because it's got the lowest patrol, or oh no, I guess that's range, so this will work. Yeah, no, it's good. So we're going to move this whole stack into the North Sea, and part of the reason I'm going to do that is that on the morale chart, if the enemy of the Commonwealth controls the North Sea or the English Channel, Britain's going to lose 3 morale points for the turn, and it would be as simple as having, if we don't move them out here now, the Germans might move them out before the end of the turn, and then all of a sudden there's a greater morale hit. So we're just going to try to nip that in the bud and move these guys all out here, and I can keep the whole stack together for 1 naval move, and I think we're going to be limited to putting them in the 2 box, and I'm fine with that. So now these guys go out to the 2 box. We could deal with some seizure of trade. I'm not going to worry about that at this point right now. Yeah, and then we've got some leftover convoy points. They're going to stay in Scapa Flow, and then the rest of these guys, they're out there in the North Sea. At some point, we'll find a better place for a graveyard here, but because it'll get a little messy, but it's fine. And then the other naval move is we're going to have these 2 transports. And let's see. We'll make it be the Spartiate. Are going to naval move, and they're going to take this engineer unit, which is a division and can be transported by the Spartiate. Because a surface naval vessel can take 1 division as transport, and then the actual transports are going to take The HQ unit French. That's a guy's name, not a unit designated to be French. And they're just going to move to Calais. So these guys will go here. And I'm trying to think if that means they need to flip. I think that does mean that they need to flip. And then these guys are here, and we do satisfy the stacking limit. So the stacking limit is 2 core sized in the division. That's fine. And then the number of naval vessels here in a minor port, which is fine. There was some rules revisions, I think, in the past where a minor port could hold, it used to be 3. I think now it's 4. Yep, the 4 naval units may stack in a friendly controlled minor port. So they're well and fine. And part of the reason that they can be here, even, we do have to account for what is called the cooperation limit. And so because the Commonwealth does not cooperate with France, this means they can't stack in the same hex, they can't transport each other's units, they can't draw supply from one another, and they can't reorganize one another, and they can't even join the same combat as each other. And there's a foreign troop commitment requirement, which means 4 units to be in the home country of another major power, and Calais is a minor power. They need to an HQ unit needs to be there, and its reorg value provides the number of units that can be there. So with this HQ unit, it can have 2 core, and technically it can have 3 core plus 2 divisions, because divisions count as 0.5, so whatever matches up to 4. And then 4 aircraft and 4 naval units can all be here because French is here. And so these units are all fine for that. Yeah, and so then, if we move some of these units into Ostend, that would be fine, but I think we would need to keep, if we're going to move any other units into France, and that's what I plan on doing, I think we need to keep the HQ in France. So if I move units into Belgium, I could, but if I wanted to have any other units down in here, I'd need to keep that HQ in the home country to provide that foreign troop commitment requirement. So some weirdness here. I could have moved them directly into Ostend, but I'd like to have the HQ in Calais, bring some more stuff over here, and then if I want to sort of plug this gap in Ostend. So those naval movements are complete for the Commonwealth, but we still have more naval movements I'd like to make. We're going to have France do a naval movement, and if I did a combined with France, they'd only get 1, but I'd like to have 2, and you'll see why in a second. So I've divided the French fleet into 2 stacks, one with a patrol of 4, and then all the units with a patrol of 3, just because I want the units that can patrol a little bit better all in one stack. And what I'm going to do is, for one naval move, I'm going to move this stack, 1 out to the Mediterranean Sea, and then into the 2 box of the Mediterranean Sea. This is just to start patrolling the waters and protecting the convoys that exist out here. And then these guys, and I think I've got 1 unit that, due to its different speed or its range, I'm going to leave in port because it doesn't match the movement needed that I want to make. And then these guys are going to go 1, hold on, 2 to the central Mediterranean Sea. So they've used 2 of their points, and then that means they can go into the 1 box of the central Mediterranean Sea. You can sort of see, so if they spent 2 of both the orange and the yellow numbers, which would mean they have 1 range left to use, and you still have to use range to get into a C box, I believe. So unfortunately, we can't quite go as far as we would have liked to go. I would have liked to have been. Oh wait, let me make sure. I'm looking at page 11 of the rules. So you're going to spend 1 unit of range to move into the sea area, and then we spend 1 movement allowance. And so yeah, these guys can technically go into the 2 box. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep, because we spent 2 to get here, and they all have 2 movement allowance left, and we can use that 2 movement allowance to go into the search number. Yep, okay. Good. So now, while we haven't gotten all of the Commonwealth naval units out to sea patrolling, the French fleet is going to help support coverage of the Mediterranean by moving its fleet out and protecting that. And then later on, the Commonwealth will send out the rest of their fleets as well. We still have a sizable Austrian fleet to worry about if they decide to engage at some point. And now we're going to get into a kind of an interesting situation. The Russians are actually going to take a naval move. So let me do a little bit of stack cleanup here. We're going to leave the transports here, and we're going to send this set of units out to the Baltic. Now, if I were trying to be as optimal as I wanted to be, this might not be a great idea, because there's a very good chance that the German fleet is going to beat the crap out of these guys. But because this is an instructional video series, I do want to try to cover some of the game mechanics, or as much of the game mechanics as I can in this turn. Since I'm likely only going to just play this 1 full turn, I'm not going to keep playing this game through the whole thing, because that would just take forever. And, you know, I don't think very many people are going to watch the entire thing. So this is what we'll do. So they're going to move out. So they're going to spend 1 of their range and movement allowances to come out to the Baltic Sea. And I'm going to sort of stop it there for a second, because now we're going to get into some other activity. But I will point out that, you know, they don't really have anywhere else to go. They could try to cut through Copenhagen in the minefield here, but they're more than likely going to have a bad time of it, just working their way out here, and they want to stick close to home probably. So this is all they really. That's all the places they really want to go. It's just out to the Baltic, and what they would have left coming out here is they could all go in the 2 box, based on the lowest movement allowance of the Retvizan. But because we have naval units that are moving into a sea area that already has enemy ships in it, there's a chance for interception. Now, if you're also playing with certain optional rules, there are movement cost penalties to moving into sea areas where an enemy is. And for this demonstration series, I'm not really using those rules, so we're going to just go straight to that. Now, the interception, knowing, you know, I kind of know that they're coming out here and they're staying here, but you would intercept to try to stop a fleet from moving beyond where your units are at, but also to have an extra chance to have combat. And I think the Germans would want to try to intercept here. And so that's what they're going to do. If they successfully intercept, that means that the fleet that's moving either has to stay there or they have to fight through. And a fight through would cause a combat to occur. If they choose to just stop, then no combat occurs until the next part of the turn. So, you know, we're going to roll to find out what happens here. You know, technically, because I'm controlling both sides, I kind of know what each side's going to do. But in a real game, you know, that choice of trying to intercept, you don't necessarily know where these guys are really trying to go to. So, you know, it's just sort of that hidden information. What is a player going to do? You don't really know until it all happens. So, we do want to try to intercept. So we're going to look at, on page 12, it's the rules 11.3. 0.5, which is the interception rule. So we are able to do the intercept. If you want to try to intercept, Announce whether you're committing subs. I don't have any subs here, so I'm not going to do that. Now we're going to turn a unit face down. And I'm not sure it really matters which one, so we'll just use the top, the Braunschweig. So we'll go ahead and flip that down. Now that doesn't mean that they don't get involved in combat, like with ground units. If they're flipped, they may not get to attack or anything. This just means that we're sort of using some of the fuel and energy of the ship to be searching for the enemy. So we will go ahead and do that, and as long as that face-down unit remains in the sea box, we may make further interception attempts in that sea area against other task forces that may move in here during this impulse. And also during the next step for naval combat allows us to attempt to start a naval combat here without having to turn another unit down. So it's just good that we're doing that anyway. And now we're going to roll a die. So if we succeed, then the interception is successful, and if it's not, then the moving force could continue as if nothing happened. And what we need to roll is the modified search number or less of the highest section that contains one of our committed units. And we would subtract 1 from our search roll, which is better if the fleet we're attempting to intercept has more than 10 ships. I'm honestly not sure if 10 ships means 10 counters, because technically each one of these has 2 ships. This one is the Tsarevich and Retvizan, so I might need to double check or ask Wendell online or something. If we say 10 ships, do we mean 10 counters? Do we mean 10 literal ships? I'm afraid to assume either way. But even if that were the case, it's 4 counters or 8 ships, so there's no bonus to the die roll. We need to roll, because we're in the 2 box, we will need to roll a 2 or less. So it's a 20% chance. Let's see what we get. Nope, I failed. I rolled a 6, so no interception. That's fine. And so from here, the Russian player is going to say, well, that's just well and convenient. I'm stopping in the Baltic Sea anyway, and my movement would allow me to go into the 2 box. So we both are patrolling the Baltic Sea in what is more or less equal ability. And now we get to, if we look at our... I've got way too many windows. Our sequence of play. So we've done all of the naval movement. We did the Commonwealth naval movement. We did the Japanese naval movement. We did the French naval movement. The Russian naval movement just completed. And so now we can look at your naval combat. So the Allied naval combat. After you've made all of your naval moves, we're looking at Rule 11.4. You can, if you wish, initiate naval combat. A side may only try to initiate combat once in each sea area, each naval combat step. Now, right away, I'm just going to say, this is the only place that a naval combat could happen right now, because this is the only place that has naval units of both sides. So we're going to choose a sea area and initiate combat here. Russia will choose to fight here on the hope that we do well and we punch the Germans in the nose. Let's see. Combat sequence. Initiate a combat in the sea area. We've done that. Both sides commit subs. Well, neither of the forces here have subs. None of these are subs, so that's easy. And then we're going to do a search for the enemy, which oddly enough could mean there actually is not a fight here, because we're, being in the sea box doesn't mean we're right next to each other. We're all within the Baltic Sea. We're all sort of floating around out here. This is a lot of area. We might not actually even find each other. So to initiate this combat, we've got to turn one of our units face down. So we'll just make this easy, and we'll make it the top unit. The Retzitvan flips. You can't choose a convoy point to initiate combat. You may not choose an aircraft in a storm or blizzard. Okay. Committing units. Units not at war with any units on the other side may not be committed. You must commit every other non-sub unit in the sea area to combat. You have a choice whether to commit your side subs. So you must commit every other non-sub unit in the sea area to combat. So all units here, I think even the convoys technically, because they could, there might be convoys that get destroyed by the Russians. That could maybe happen here. Everything's going to be involved as much as we can. Now each side rolls a search die and compares the result to the search numbers in the sea box section its committed units occupy. So this is fine weather. We would add a die roll if at least one friendly committed naval aircraft unit or seaplane carrier is present. But that's not going to be the case. That would effectively make it like we have units in 2, but it would technically mean we have 3, effective 3. So that's sort of a bonus to your die roll. Hard to grok that. Sorry, there's someone car alarm going off nearby. I'm not sure if you guys hear that. Someone ought to really turn that off. So if we had a naval unit here or a seaplane carrier, that basically means we have better scouting ability. So we would treat it as 1 better, but we don't have any, so we won't. And then we would also subtract 1 from your search roll for every 10 enemy convoy points in the sea area. So the more convoy points there are, that is bettering your chances to find something. And then you'd also add 1 to your search roll, which is a worse case if the sea area has rain, snow, storm, or blizzard, but the weather is fine here. There's a special note also that you can commit additional face-up non-convoy units in the sea box to increase your search by turning them face down before rolling. You can either turn 4 units face down to subtract 1 from your roll, or 10 to subtract 2. Unfortunately, we don't have enough units to get the bonus. There just simply aren't enough here. And so, that's as good as it's going to get. So we'll do the Russians first. So, Russian search roll. So it's right now just a 20%. Let's see what happens. Failed. So the Russians aren't able to find the Russians. And let's see if the Russians aren't able to find the Germans. The Germans can also try to do a search. Let's see if there's anything. Well, yeah, the Germans still have to roll. Now they could potentially flip 4 units face down to subtract 1 from their search roll. And I think they might as well do that. Now, I think these die rolls may have to be like simultaneous. So if you're playing against someone, maybe you'd have to decide if you're going to face your units down before you roll. So like I can't decide. I shouldn't really be able to decide, oh, well, because they didn't find me, I'm going to make the extra effort to find them. I don't think I'm really allowed to do that, but because I'm playing myself, I don't really have much of a choice. So I will though decide just to flip all of them. And so now we have a bonus for our die roll. We're going to subtract 1, and we still need to get 2 or less, so we'll see. And we failed. So we failed, and if both sides' modified search roll is higher than the highest modified search number in the sections occupied by one of its committed, there is no naval combat. Go to the next sea area. Well, isn't that something? That's unfortunate. I kind of wanted there to be combat. Opponents. So what would come next is opponent's naval combat. After your side has resolved combat in all of their selected areas, any major power on the other side can try to initiate combat in any other sea areas your side moved a non-sub unit into or within your naval mission step or naval movement. So I might need to reverse time and just force something so that we can actually demonstrate it. So we're going to do, so what would normally happen next is opponent's naval combat. And what this would basically mean is if the Russians didn't designate a fight here, if they just said, nah, the Germans could say, well, no, I do want to try to fight, and then we would do what we just did. We'd roll and find out what would happen. But any place that the Russians did choose to potentially have combat, the Germans could not pick. So there's really only one good chance in each sea area per impulse that a naval combat could occur. I'm going to pretend, I'm going to give the edge to the Germans in this case, just for fun. That's what we're going to need to do. We're going to pretend like, that was the real roll. There it is, guys. We flipped 4 units and we didn't even need it. We rolled a 1. The Germans have some surprise on the opponent. So how would this work? So let's see. If either side's modified roll is less than or equal to the modified search number, then a naval combat will occur. If a combat occurs, each of your committed units is included. If your modified search roll was less than or equal to the modified search number of the section it is in. Okay, so again, looking back at 11.4, because we rolled a 1, all the units in the 2 box can be involved, and if for whatever reason we had units in the 1 box, they could also be involved. If I had rolled only we'll say a 3, because we got the -1 to our die roll due to flipping all those units, we would have only been able to include units in the 2 box. So if you end up with different stacks of ships in different C boxes, each with their own differing patrol ability, there are chances where only some of your units are going to be able to get involved in a combat because the other ships are, they're somewhere else down here patrolling. They're not where the action's going to be. So there is sort of a point to trying to spread out some of your units so at least some of them could get involved in a fight while others may not be able to. But again, the better you roll, the better chance that all of your units from all the C boxes could be involved. If only one side has units included, then so if only one side succeeds in finding the other, if only your side has units included, then you must pick at least one section containing committed enemy units. Only those enemy units are also included in the combat. And so what this would mean is if the Russians found nothing, or rather, let's reverse it. If the Germans found nothing, like they did in our actual die roll, but if they found nothing, but the Russians found something, they could potentially choose to fight just the convoys, potentially. So, that's sort of a case where, you want to be careful. In this case that we decided to go with, it's going to work out okay. But you got to be careful because if, they decide, you pick at least one section containing committed enemy units, they very well could pick the convoys. And I believe they have to be committed. At least that's my understanding. I might have that a little bit wrong, but we'll keep going here. So the Germans found the Russians with a die roll of 1, technically a die roll of 0. So now we look at surprise points. Your search rolls will also determine the number of surprise points you have available. You can spend surprise points to improve your chances of success in the combat, or even to avoid combat entirely. You get surprise points equal to the sum of the modified search number in the highest section of the C box that contains a unit you have included in the combat, and your opponent's unmodified search roll. So that would mean technically the Russians have, have 3 surprise points. So Russians 3 surprise. And the Germans instead have the modified search number of the high section. So 2 plus, what did the Russians originally roll? It was pretty bad, right? 6. So Germans have 8 surprise. quite a bit more. Quite a lot of bit a bit better. Work out the difference between your surprise points and your opponents. Whoever has the most may spend that difference if there is no difference, or if you have the least, you can't spend any points. So the differential is 5 surprise for the Germans, and they can spend it to avoid combat, to choose the combat type, to select the target, increase your column on the naval combat chart, and decrease the opponent's column on the combat chart. So if we only have 5, it might behoove us to either increase the German combat chart or decrease the Russians' combat chart. I think it's probably going to be one of those things. I don't think we're going to avoid. The Germans want to crush the Russian Navy here. So in terms of choosing the combat type, so regardless of the surprise points, we would have to determine what is the naval combat, type of naval combat, and in which case the person with the surprise points could pick the combat point. So let's see. Determine the type of naval combat you will fight. A naval air combat involves each side's aircraft, so probably not going to be that. Surface action pits each side's naval units against the other, so it's probably going to be that. And a submarine combat pits one side's subs against the other. Well, obviously, this is going to just end up being a surface naval combat. Yeah, that's the default. If you look at 11.4.6.1, the choice, there's a sort of a criteria, but eventually it's just going to be a surface naval combat. So at the start of each naval combat round, both sides secretly decide how many of their committed naval units they are screening from combat, either to protect them from damage or prevent the other side from excluding their units from combat based on speed. Convoy points must always be screened. Both sides have decided that their choices simultaneously. Well, obviously, the convoys for the Germans are going to be screened. After announcing screened units, you may exclude any of your surface combat ships from combat if they are faster than the slowest unscreened ship on the opposing side, unless the other side spends 3 surprise points per point of speed difference to including those units. So if you have a 5-speed battle cruiser, you could exclude it from combat with a 3-speed pre-dreadnought unless the side with the pre-dreadnought, or the speed pre-dreadnought unless the side with the pre-dreadnought spends 6 surprise points. Blah blah blah. Okay. If they are faster than the slowest, I'm not sure that only really Germany could do this, and I don't think. They do have the Blucher that they could include, but if they did that, yeah. See, I don't want to exclude them from combat. We want everything involved as best we can. And so the speeds are 4 and 3. Sorry guys, I'm trying to fight this. This is a new thing that came out in the revised rules about fast units leaving. So the slowest is 3, which means that we could try to have these 4 units excluded. But, then if they're excluded, then I don't believe that they can provide their combat ability. And I think this is a fairly even fight, so the Russians aren't going to try to exclude any units at all. I think that's just the reality of it. They're just going to try to do what they can to determine combat results, work out the total attack factors of each side's unscreened service naval units and subs included in the round. Screen units do not add their attack value factors to their side's total, but do still count towards the total number of enemy ships. Okay, so we'll need to write down a couple of things. So I'm off-screen going to be looking at the naval combat chart on the player chart. So, you know, let's follow along if you're reading. Open that up if you got the physical copy. So we're going to determine the sort of base values. And so we're going to add up our what do you call it? The attack factors, which, if we look at our unit chart, so attack factors is the top left value. So the total for the Russians are 3 plus 5 is 8, plus 5 is 13, plus 3 is 16. So Rush is 16 attack factors, and the number of ships. This is one of those unfortunate circumstances of interpreting what is the number of ships. Is it units or is it literal ships? And I'm a little worried about that. A ship is a naval unit. Okay. So this is actually, yeah, okay. The book does tell us it's buried in 11.4.7, but a ship is a naval unit. So there are 4 ships here. Now, compared here, and I'll flip these guys all back to flipped in a second, their total combat power is 17. So German is 17 attack factors, and the number of ships here, because you have to include the screened units to the total number of enemy ships here, that means it's going to be 5, then a ship is 2 convoy points, and I think it rounds up, so that would be 2 more. So 7 ships. So looking at the naval combat, so both of these sets of units would be rolling on the 15 to 20 surface ship column on the naval combat, so they're equal there. And because there are 4 ships on the Russians, the Germans are going to roll or are going to do 1 X result, 1 D result, 1 A result. And the Russians are actually going to do a little bit better. They're going to do 1, 1, and 2. Again, I'm cross-reference. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong column. Dang it. So 15 to 20. So the Germans would do 1X, no D, and 1A. And that's 1 sink, 0 damages, and 1 abort. And the Russians would actually get to do 1 sink result and 3 abort. So the Russians are actually, from a base chart value, going to come out ahead of the Germans. But because the Germans have so much surprise, they can spend, they'll basically have 1 left over, which won't get used, but they can use, 4 of their surprise points to move the columns down a shift, or move theirs up a shift. And you can, if you're looking at the chart, you can kind of compare. So if we said we spent 2 shifts on the Russians, that would effectively make their combat factors 6 to 9, which would only do 1 damaged and 3 aborts. So that's a little bit better. by comparison, if we spent all those points on increasing the German chart, that would do 1 sink, 1 damage, and 3 aborts. If we split the difference, it would do 2 damage and 3 aborts versus then we would be doing against the Russians as the Germans, 1, 1, and 1. I think what we want to do is we want to reduce as much as possible what the Russians are doing. So I think we're going to spend our 4 points to reduce the Russians to 1 damage and 3 aborts. I think that's the best way to do it. So, German spends force surprise to reduce Russian results by 2 column shifts, which means that we inflict on the Russians, again, ours stays the same, so we're going to be doing 1x, 1a, 1x, 1a dealt to Russians, and then the Russians are going to do 1d and 3 aborts to the Germans. And I'm going to point out right away, you're going to notice ship combat, naval combat, at least in the surface fighting, is very deterministic. Very deterministic. You know, if you can figure out your combat powers and you can figure out the number of ships, that's going to tell you exactly what the results are, and then we have to work out the results, which involves some random number sort of jockeying. But what you want is a great number of combat power and very little ships. Very little ships will lead to less results. If you have a lot of ships, it doesn't matter, you know, if your opponent's bringing even a decent number of attack factors to the battle and you've got a whole bunch of ships, all those cannons firing are going to hit something, and it might hit something that you don't want hit. So, you know, there's probably an ideal number of ships to take. I've seen some data analysis trying to figure out, you know, what's the perfect flotilla to have of ships, but the reality is, you know, you want to try to have great number of attack factors versus the number of ships. You might want to have some crappy ships there to protect your better ships, but in the end, you also want ships with good armor values, which we'll get into in just a second now as we deal with the combat results. So, to explain the combat results, so the combat result. So an X is the unit is immediately destroyed. A D is damage. You put a damage marker on the unit, and if the unit is already damaged, it is destroyed. Instead, a damage unit only has half its printed attack. AA and ASW factors, its defense factor is 1 higher. Its range and speed are not affected, and then it has to abort at the end of the combat. And an A is an abort, which just sends them back to a base face down. So we have to implement all X results, then all D results, and finally all A results. And for each combat result, you select targets by alternating with the owner selecting first. However, screen units may not be chosen as targets this round, except by spending surprise, so the Russians aren't going to get to hit any convoys until every other non-screen unit has been destroyed or aborted. So it's likely that we're not going to see anything really bad happen here. Okay, so let's just resolve the X's first. So one Russian ship has the potential to be destroyed, and the owner is going to pick which one is going to maybe suffer that result. And what's going to happen here is we're going to roll a die. And if we roll the target's value or less, it will be destroyed. If we roll greater than its defense value, then and the X becomes a D, meaning it becomes damaged. I would rather have a unit be damaged at this point than destroyed, so I'm going to actually select the Poltava to receive this, and we'll roll to see, it's a 50-50 chance, more or less, that, or nearly 50-50 chance, that it survives and it's just damaged, in which case we won't lose morale for that. So we'll roll a die. We rolled a 2. So if you roll the target's defense value or less, it suffers the result. Okay, so the Poltava is destroyed. So we'll go ahead and put it down here for now in the graveyard, though again, not a great place for it because it's a naval unit and that could get confusing. That sucks for the Russians. Now we'll deal with the D. So I think we are going to want to have, the Germans are going to have the D go to, we'll have the Ostfriesland take the potential hit for this. So they'll roll for damage, and we succeeded. We rolled higher than the armor value of the Ostfriesland, so the damage result against the German is lowered to an A. The unit aborts. At the end of the combat round, turn the unit and any cargo face down, so it's already going to be face down, and return to base according to the return to base rolls. So, he's going to end up going to Danzig, probably. So we'll go ahead and put him there right now, because this is going to be the end of the combat round here shortly. So that worked out okay. And now we have the A results. So we're going to do 1 to the Russians, and I think at this point we'll have the Retvizan. So and the Russians are picking that because it's the first choice in this combat result of A for the Russians, and we'll roll the die, and we actually succeeded. We rolled higher than the 8, and so an A becomes one half. So that's going to be it. They're fine. 1/2 A means that, if there was another A result on the Retvizan, then it would abort, but because that's all the hits that the Russians are going to get, then they don't need to do a whole lot more. So they're done. And now we have to resolve the 3 aborts. So let's see. The first one we'll have this one roll for the Nassau. So that one gets to ignore the abort. It's a half abort now. And so now for the second abort of the 3, the Russians get to pick. They're actually going to pick the Nassau again. They can pick a unit that's already had a result. So we're going to roll, and it did succeed, so it's a half abort, but because it now has 2 aborts, this unit will have to abort. I hope that makes sense, right? It suffered 2 halves, so that's a full abort, so that unit is now aborted, and now there's only 1 abort left to go, the 3rd abort result, and the German gets to pick, and at this point it doesn't really matter too much. We'll just have the Blucher take it, and it actually was a fail, so now that unit has to abort and goes to Danzig, and now the rest of these units here are flipped. This one as well, because they were flipped before. They should have stayed flipped, but just to work out these results. Okay, so we just got through all of that. All of the results have now been accounted for. And I believe, so after each round of naval combat, any unit at war with another unit in this area may abort. If any unit on a side chooses to abort, all units at war with another unit in the sea area must also abort. If any units remain at sea, go back to step 2 in the combat sequence and run through the sequence again. So, interesting. So would we like any units to abort? Well, if we abort with the Germans, then all of their ships, including the convoy, have to go to port, and then we won't get the resources that I think we're shipping through the Baltic for the Germans in the production round. The Russians may want to abort. They lost a ship. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough call. Because essentially, well, so right now, if either side decided to abort, because the Germans sank a ship, they would get a political point payout because of a major victory. But I think the Russians, want the opportunity to still sink a ship, so that they can get some points and even out the score there. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's say that everyone's going to stick around. The only thing is the total combat power is 6, and the total combat power here is 8, 9, 10, 11. 6 to 11. Ooh. So if we were able to find the 6, and how many ships are there? 3. So 6 on the 3, we might be able to damage some of these units, and then 9 on the 2, we might be able to damage some units. And then abort. Knowing that that would be the case if there was another combat, I think we might actually want to abort. I think that's what we are going to end up doing, because yeah, I just that's unfortunate. I think we might need to abort these guys. Yeah. Okay. These guys are going to abort. They're going to choose to abort to avoid a second combat round. We're going to send everything, including the convoy points, to Kolberg, which I believe the convoys count as, 3 convoys are going to count as 2 ships, and you can have 4 ships in a minor port. So I think that stacking is fine. I'm not going to send them to Danzig, because that's almost done with its stacking limit, and I don't want to put things in Konigsberg because I probably shouldn't have been allowed to stack all those units at Konigsberg originally anyway. Oh no, maybe they were in Danzig. Come to think, yeah, I'm just going to have all of these guys go to Danzig. I should have just done that. It's probably better. It's a major port. Okay, sorry. All these guys are going to abort to Danzig. And that leaves the Russians actually in control of the Baltic, which is not the result I expected. But, yeah, okay, interesting. How about that? So because of that, if we then go back to the results here, um, okay, so because while the Russians have managed to ward off the Germans and even caused the convoy points to leave, they did suffer. The Sevastopol and the Poltava were sunk, which, when we look at the damage for the morale purposes for political point victory, not morale. Gee whiz. Okay. Let me get. There we go. Okay. Winning a major victory. Major victory means taking at least 2 build points and losses less than the other side after all rounds of combat. Only naval units count for naval battles. So the 4 production that was lost here means that the Central Power is going to get 2 political points. So they go from 22 to 24 for that. And when it comes time for the counting of lost morale, these units here, basically, it's going to count against the morale for defeated units. And it's the first cycle, so it's worth 2 morale. So losing the engineers is going to be 3. Losing this ship is only 2. It's kind of weird. I would think it would cost more morale to have your fleet destroyed, but I don't know. But that's going to add to the Russian morale hurt. So yeah, they may have taken control of the Baltic, but they just got punched in the mouth a little bit. So not too bad. Could be worse. We'll see what happens in the rest of the round. I'm going to move this over here a little bit out of the way for the graveyard, but there you go. Okay. Wow. All right. We're at an hour and 20 minutes. I apologize. I know how we get going here, and I'm needing to explain all of the rules as we go. That was our first naval combat. Now you've seen a demonstration. I had to force it with the die roll, but interesting. And you can kind of see, yeah, technically the Germans won the fight by actually destroying more units, but they had to flee at the end of everything, and now we don't have convoy points to move units, so win some, you lose some. So naval combat's done. Any strategic bombardment? I don't think we're going to have any. Do we have any ground strikes? I don't think we're going to have any ground strikes. Do we have any rail movement? I think we are going to have some rail. The Russians have a couple of rail moves that they can execute on a combined action, and all we're simply going to do is we're going to move this garrison unit from Petrograd and rail it to Helsinki, and now we've got something controlling Helsinki, because I didn't have anything there. I'm worried about partisans something later, so we're going to rail that unit there. And then I think that's all the rail moves that we wanted to make. Any land movement, I think we're going to have some very minor land moves. So we are going to use... Let me get back to the... Russians have 5 land moves that they could take. We don't really have a lot of options, but I am going to move this engineer unit up with these cavalry to support any further endeavors. Then we are going to have the English corps here, as soon as I can find it, move into Ostend along with the engineer. We're going to leave French here to help provide the foreign troop commitment needed. And then, let's see, any other moves? No. I think that's all of our... Whoops. Too many windows. Land movement, debark lands at sea, done. Invasions, none at this point. Land combat. So, let's see. Do we want to try to attack this? So we'd have 6 to 4. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out too well. Probably not worth it. We'd get a little bit of a bonus. Well, and we also could look at, do we want to... That's kind of too late, but we could have asked, did we want to power up the French unit for a offensive? And right now, we only have 5 offensive points, so that's not even enough to do that. So I'm going to say no. I don't think we're going to attack. It'd be 6 against 4, and that's just simply not enough to make a difference. We'll keep it like this. We could attack 4, 9 again. Yeah, that's not going to work either. The only other attack we could maybe make that would be worth it would maybe be up here, and we could try to have, let's see, 9 against 8. So that would be 1 to 1 basically. Which would be a +2, -1 for being unobserved, and then -1 for being, anti-observed. So that would be flat, and then a +4 because these units are disrupted. We could afford the loss. If we rolled really well, that would be pretty good. But a +4 is pretty garbage. We'd actually hurt ourselves pretty badly if we didn't. If we rolled average on 2d10, which would put us somewhere in the 10, 11, 12 range, +4. I mean, that... yeah, I mean, we could do it. Yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead and try. So, we will attack, and what we will do then is... Well, we lose the engineer. Oh... We might lose the engineer. I was supposed to have having all of this figured out, of course, but now I'm waffling on a choice still, like I said I wasn't going to do. I don't think we would have to take it on the engineer, only if we were using it, or provide its +1 against forward or against... Okay, so wouldn't have to actually take the first loss. We could lose it on the... Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and try to do this. So we are going to attack. Oh, but he could add. Then he would make himself susceptible. Yeah, because this HQ unit could support here. Okay, well let's just do it. Let's just see what happens. Let's get ballsy here, and I'm running this video longer than I meant to, so I apologize for that. But okay, so 1-1 odds. That's a +2. It's going unobserved because I don't have any balloons, so that's a -1. So now it's just a +1. They are going to anti-observe with this plane unit. So that makes it a 0. But the engineer gives it +1. And because there are 2 disrupted units, that's +4 more, so it's +5. If the HQ unit decided to flip, which I'll go ahead and do, then it goes back down to a +4. So this is going to be a really, this is going to be a tough call. Okay, so 2d4, Oh my god, no. Okay. Well, that's what I get. That's what I get. So 9 plus 4 is 13 is remarkably nothing. That's amazing. Okay, so look look at the combat chart on the back of your rule book. So we rolled a 9 on 2d10, plus 4 gives us a result of 13. This is on the assault table. It's a dash dash, which means no one is hurt, but all these units flip. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. That's crazy. Okay, well, we tried. We tried to take Konigsberg, and we failed. We failed to take Konigsberg. Fair enough. Fair enough, my friends. Fair enough. That could have been really bad for the Russians, or it could have been pretty good for the Russians, and ended up being okay for everybody in the end, which, that's funny. That is funny. Okay, let's do airy bases. So, I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move this unit 4 hexes to basically be in Boulogne. So I'm going to take, and it's going to move, and I'm going to count the hex dots, because when you do a rebase, you can move double your range. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I do need to look to see if that's going to cause it to flip. It might flip because I'm doing that, but I want to move these to support now the British forces, the BEF, joining the fight here. Like scrolling through the rolls trying to get to the rebase. 2, you can double, you may da-da-da-da-da. Okay, rebasing units stay face up. Okay, so they're going to move here, and it's okay for them to be here because of the HQ unit. And the reason why I didn't put it here is just in case we get into some issues with stacking or getting pushed back, they're actually fine. And then also this way they can support better from a range perspective, so they can support here from back here, they can support here, so that's all well and good and fine. I don't think I'm going to have any other rebases for air units because everything else is either flipped or already in an okay position. So I think that's it. And then finally, whoops, we're going to look at do we want to do any reorganization. So a lot of our HQ units are flipped. I don't want to flip him to reorg because he would then be susceptible to attack. So he is just going to stay there. These guys are all already face up. Face down HQ, can't do anything there. Fine over here, and then I think we will have to have Joffre do some flipping. So we're going to flip Joffre. He's going to get 3 reorganization points. We're going to flip, and then we're going to flip. And that's 3 units flipped, and that's going to keep these guys alive, and it isn't within range. 1, 2, 3. I better double check that. I'm just validating what I can do here within range of the reorganization of non-motorized. Ooh, I actually might not be able to reach these guys. I should have not. So 3 non-motorized movement points. So 1, 2, 3. I might not have actually been able to get to these guys. I might have been playing that wrong. Well, I guess I could have... I guess I could have moved, and then 1, 2, 3. That puts them out of range of these guys, but that might be okay. Yeah, we'll just say that I did that to make sure this was legal. That'll just have to do, I guess. Seems awfully weird to have to do that, but we'll do it that way just to make sure all this was legal, and we'll just pretend like that HQ unit's been here the whole time. I'm not going to stress over it. It's fine. Okay. So, reorganization is complete. We did reorganize. We're going to keep these guys going alive for a little bit longer. Everything else is going okay. Combat, all that stuff's over. And now we're going to see about the die roll. So, alright, so if you have finished your impulse, roll a die. If every major power on your side, neutral and active, chose a pass action, subtract 2. If every major power except 1 on your side chose a pass action, subtract 1 from the die roll. Technically, it is possible for us to end the turn, because technically the United States has been passing every time. I've been having it pass, I just haven't been announcing that it's passing. So technically, if we rolled a 1 on the die and we took a -1, it could actually end here. So we'll go ahead and just do that. I assume it won't be a 1. Oh my frickin' god. What? No. No. Oh my god, no. Alright. Alright. Okay. Well, that's okay. That's alright. That makes things a little bit easier for us. So, again, just to explain what happened, the Allied impulse marker is on the 0 space, which would require us, on the last impulse die roll, to roll a 1, or rather roll a 0, to end the turn. You modify the die roll. Okay, yeah, you would modify the die roll based on how many major powers on your side chose a pass action. If every major power, neutral and active, chose a pass action, then you would subtract 2. If every major power except 1 on your side chose a pass action, okay, if every major power except 1 Okay, so that's not the case. So no, the turn did not end. Okay. I did not even need to roll the die. So, never mind. I'm going crazy for nothing, guys. I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. We're going to go ahead and advance we're going to flip this, and it's going to go on now to Impulse 7 for the Central Powers. Now it will be legally possible for the turn to begin ending. And again, like I was just reading incorrectly, in Section 12 of the rules, the last impulse test. So the Central Powers could, if they wanted to, if they had both Germany and Austria just pass, but just both pass, because they don't have anything that they want to do, they can then subtract 2 from the die roll, which means if we rolled a 3 or less on the end of the turn, the end of the impulse on the next impulse video, which I will do, if we rolled a 3 or less, that would cause the turn to end. And so the Germans might want to do that and say, okay, we want to increase the chances that the turn just ends because we're out of gas and we don't want to let the Allies do anything more. They would then just have everyone pass to try to end the turn. So everyone gets reorged and we get all the stuff restarted. So I'll have to think about that for the next video and decide if the Central Powers will do that. I'll have to think on it. Otherwise, that does it for this video. Almost 2 hours long, hour and 40 minutes-ish. I apologize. But we did get to try some new mechanics out with the naval combat, so we resolved that. And the Commonwealth is in the game, so we got to get them sort of involved in what's going on. So all good stuff, all interesting stuff is going to take place now. We'll see what happens on the next run. And Yeah, the Serbians weren't going to do anything. There's nothing they can really do. So I think we did everything that we could have wanted to do. Uh, Thank you for watching. Didn't mean for it to be this long. I tried to move through things as quickly as possible, but those naval roles can be a little tricky. I might do another video in the future that is focused solely on a really large naval battle. Maybe we'll recreate Jutland or Jutland, however it's pronounced, at some point with these as a separate video, because I don't think they're going to fight by the time we're done with this series. We'll see. So yeah, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more. I imagine if you've been watching all of these videos up to this point, you may already be subscribed, or you're tracking this on the Board Game Geek listing, which is where I do end up getting all of these posted. It's been interesting so far, so hopefully you stick with it. Catch you next time.